The expendable battalion. Captain Maya Chen stood at the viewport of the transport vessel Dauntless, watching as the swirling azure atmosphere of planet LV 789 grew larger. The beautiful blue-green world, nicknamed Sapphire by the crew, looked deceptively peaceful from orbit. "How long until landing, Lieutenant?" Maya asked, not turning from the viewport. 90 minutes, Captain," replied Lieutenant Aaron Kowalski from his station. His fingers moved efficiently across the control panel, but Maya noticed the tension in his shoulders. They all felt it. Maya nodded silently. 90 minutes until her 300 soldiers, her responsibility, her family, would begin a mission that didn't add up. The orders had come directly from Earth Central Command. Establish a forward base on Sapphire, gather intelligence on potential alien activity, and prepare for the main expedition fleet. Simple, straightforward, except for all the inconsistencies. Their equipment was outdated, with atmosphere suits that showed microscopic stress fractures and weapons systems that were 2 generations behind current military standards. Their transport ships were refurbished cargo vessels with questionable life support redundancies. They had been given minimal medical supplies, barely enough food for 3 weeks on a 6-month deployment, and strangely, a complete communications silence order after landing. Maya moved away from the viewport and walked through the main hold where her soldiers made final preparations. She saw the unspoken truth in their eyes. Veterans recognized a bad mission when they saw one. Commander Ivy Santos looked up from checking her gear as Maya approached. Her usually stoic face showed a flicker of understanding. "They all know, don't they?" Maya asked quietly. "Hard to miss when they give us broken equipment and food for half the mission duration," Ivy replied. She had never been one to sugarcoat things. It was why Maya had made her second in command. "Gather the officers in the planning room." 10 minutes. As Maya walked away, she felt the crushing weight of command. She had spent the 3-week journey to Sapphire analyzing their orders, equipment, and the suspicious lack of intelligence briefings. The conclusion was inescapable. They were meant to die here. In the small planning room, Maya faced her 5 senior officers. Ivy stood with arms crossed, her expression grim. Aaron nervously adjusted the holographic display controls. Dr. Zara Patel, their chief medical officer, sorted through her woefully inadequate supplies. Lieutenant Dex Williams, tactical officer with 20 years of experience, studied planetary maps with deepening concern. Engineer Sergeant Rico Mendez sat silently, his calloused hands fidgeting with a piece of faulty equipment. "I'll be direct," Maya began. "This mission is designed to fail. We're being sent in blind, under-equipped, and without proper support." No one looked surprised. They had all reached the same conclusion. Standard procedure would be to follow orders and die trying. Maya continued, "I'm proposing something different." She activated the holographic display, showing a detailed map of their landing zone. "Our official orders are to establish a forward base here and begin reconnaissance. If we do that, we'll be wiped out within weeks. Someone is expecting that outcome." Maya zoomed out the map, revealing a mountain range 200 kilometers from their designated landing zone. "We're going to disappear." Over the next hour, she outlined her plan. They would make their initial landing as ordered, but instead of establishing the designated base, they would split into mobile units and abandon their trackers, effectively vanishing from command's monitoring systems. "Won't that be seen as desertion?" Aaron asked, concerned. "Technically, yes," Maya admitted. "But we're already written off as dead. We're going to use that to our advantage." Each squad would have specific objectives: securing better equipment, finding sustainable resources, learning the terrain, and gathering actual intelligence rather than serving as target practice. "One more thing," Maya said as they finished. "I'm not ordering any of you to do this. This goes against direct command. Anyone who wants to follow original orders can do so without judgment." Ivy snorted. "With all due respect, Captain, command didn't give us much choice. They sent us to die." I'd rather live to spite them." The others nodded in agreement. "Then it's settled," Maya said. "Operation Phoenix begins after landing." "Phoenix?" Rico asked. "Because we're going to rise from the ashes when everyone expects us to burn," Maya replied with grim determination. As the meeting ended, Dex stayed behind. "The troops will follow you, Captain, but what's the endgame? Even if we survive longer than expected, we're still stranded on an unknown planet." Maya nodded. It was the question she'd been asking herself since discovering the truth about their mission. "First we survive. Then we learn why we were sent here to die. And then," she paused, "we find a way home on our terms, not commands." 90 minutes later, they entered Sapphire's atmosphere. The descent was rough, the old transport ships shaking violently as they pushed through thick cloud layers. Warning lights flashed across control panels. The first attack came as they broke through the cloud cover. Brilliant energy beams from concealed ground positions struck 2 of their 5 transports immediately. Maya watched through the viewport as the ships, carrying nearly 120 of her people, erupted into flames and plummeted to the surface. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered, but their pilot was already pulling the ship into a steep dive, trying to avoid the targeting systems. Another ship hit. Aaron called out. "They're going down, but report survivors." Their own ship rocked as a glancing blow struck one engine. Alarms wailed as the transport began losing altitude too quickly. "Brace for impact," Maya shouted, grabbing onto a support beam. The crash was violent. Maya was thrown against a bulkhead, then slammed back to the floor. Metal tore and sparked around them. Someone was screaming. Emergency lights flickered on, casting the interior in a dull red glow. When the ship finally stopped moving, Maya pushed herself up, ignoring the pain shooting through her ribs. "Sound off. Who's alive?" Groans and calls came from around the hold. Ivy was already on her feet, a nasty gash on her forehead, but otherwise functional. Dr. Patel moved between injured soldiers, her limited medical supplies already being distributed. "Communications are down," Aaron reported, coughing through the smoke. "Life support failing. We need to evacuate." Maya nodded. "Get everyone who can move ready to go. Priority on weapons, medical supplies, and water." "Unknown forces approaching from the north," Dex warned, checking the ship's damaged sensors. "Their weaponry is more advanced than anything in our databases." Maya looked around at her surviving crew. They had been sent here to die, used as nothing more than expendable tools. But as she watched them quickly organizing, helping the wounded, preparing to face whatever waited outside, she saw something their betrayers had overlooked. Humans didn't accept death easily, especially when it came as betrayal. "Remember the plan," Maya said as they prepared to open the damaged hatch. "We're not here to win their war. We're here to survive their betrayal." The hatch creaked open, revealing the harsh landscape of Sapphire. The air was breathable according to their sensors, but filled with a strange mist that immediately coated their skin and equipment. In the distance, the other transport ships burned, sending black smoke into the azure sky. Maya took the first step onto the planet's surface. The ground was soft, covered with a moss-like vegetation that seemed to pulse slightly under her boots. On the horizon, a forest of towering crystalline structures glinted in the alien sunlight. 5 minutes until we split into assigned squads, she reminded everyone. Remove your trackers. As far as command is concerned, we died in the landing. As the surviving members of her battalion gathered around her, Maya felt fierce determination replace her earlier anger. Earth Command had sent them here as sacrifices, expecting reports of their deaths to filter back as valuable tactical data. Instead, they were about to vanish, and in that disappearance would be the first step toward an unlikely victory. They had been sent to die, but Captain Maya Chen and her people had other plans. The first revelation came 3 days after the crash, when Sergeant Rico's engineering team captured one of the alien drones that had been monitoring their crash site. The technology was unlike anything they had seen before. Organic components seamlessly integrated with crystalline structures that seemed to process information without conventional circuitry. This isn't just advanced, Rico explained as they examined the drone in their temporary hideout, a cave system 5 kilometers from the crash site. This is evolutionary. The tech is growing and adapting. The second revelation came a week later, when Lieutenant Dex's reconnaissance team observed something unexpected. A firefight between two distinctly different groups of aliens. "They're not unified," Dex reported, displaying footage captured on a salvage camera. "Look at the differences in physiology, weapons, even tactical approach." The footage showed slender, crystalline armored beings firing energy weapons at bulkier, insectoid creatures with more conventional projectile weapons. The implications were clear. They had landed in the middle of an alien conflict. But the third revelation was the most disturbing. While examining the drone's memory core, Aaron discovered encrypted communications between Earth Command and a species calling themselves the Kreks. "They knew," Maya said quietly as Aaron displayed the translated communications. "They knew there were 2 alien species here, and they made a deal with one of them." According to the fragmentary data, Earth Command had agreed to send a small human force, expendable, in their words, as a distraction for the Safarans, the crystalline native species, while the Kreks established their mining operations on the other side of the planet. "They sold us out," Ivy said, her voice tight with controlled rage. "They traded our lives for mining rights." Maya studied the data, feeling cold determination replacing her initial shock. "And now we know why they sent us with outdated equipment and minimal supplies. We were never meant to succeed or even survive long enough to discover the truth." As the implications sank in, Dr. Paddle entered the command cave, excitement breaking through her usual calm demeanor. "Captain, you need to see this immediately," she said, placing a small sample container on the makeshift table. Inside was what appeared to be a piece of the moss-like vegetation, pulsing with subtle blue bioluminescence. "We've been analyzing the local flora, trying to identify potential food sources," she explained. "This moss doesn't just photosynthesize. It processes and stores information. The entire planet is essentially a vast, organic computational network." Maya stared at the sample, the beginnings of a plan forming in her mind. If the planet itself was a computer of sorts, and the Safarans had evolved to interface with it. "Aaron, Rico, I need you to figure out how this connects to the drone technology. Dex, I want detailed maps of all Kreks positions based on our reconnaissance. Ivy, prepare our people for extended guerrilla operations." Her officers looked at her with renewed purpose, understanding dawning in their eyes. "They sent us here as sacrificial pawns," Maya said, her voice hardening with resolve. "But they forgot one thing about humans. We don't play by the rules when the game is rigged." The algorithm of victory. 2 months after the crash landing, Maya stood on a ridge overlooking the Kreks mining operation. The bulky insectoid aliens had constructed an impressive facility in the time since her battalion's arrival, stripping away the living crystal formations that the Safarans had cultivated for millennia. "Their efficiency would be admirable if it wasn't so destructive," commented Dr. Patel, who stood beside her. "How's our project progressing?" Maya asked, not taking her eyes off the facility below. "The interface is functional. Rico and Aaron have managed to adapt Safaran biotechnology to our systems. We can now communicate directly with the planetary network, though our access is limited compared to the natives." This had been their breakthrough. After establishing contact with a small group of Safarans, who had initially assumed humans were Kreks allies, they had learned the truth. Sapphire wasn't just a planet. It was a vast biological supercomputer, and the crystalline formations were its processing nodes. The Safarans were its caretakers, having evolved alongside it for millions of years. The Kreks had come seeking the crystals for their remarkable energy storage capabilities, not understanding or caring that harvesting them was like ripping out pieces of a living brain. "And the algorithm," Maya pressed. "Complete. Dr. Paddle replied with a small smile. Once uploaded to the planetary network, it will do exactly what we theorized. Maya nodded, allowing herself a moment of hope. Their plan had seemed impossible at first: use the planet's own computational network against the Kreks by creating an algorithm that would precisely calculate the most efficient way to disrupt their operations with minimal resources. They called it calculated extinction, though extinction wasn't their goal. The algorithm would analyze Kreks patterns, predict movements, identify weaknesses, and coordinate Safaran and human forces for maximum impact. It would turn the Kreks' methodical efficiency against them. Let's head back, Maya said, turning away from the view. It's time for the final briefing. At their main base, now a complex of interconnected caves enhanced with salvage technology and Safaran biostructures, the surviving members of Maya's battalion had gathered. 217 humans, where Earth Command had expected none to survive. Tomorrow, we implement Operation Calculated Extinction, Maya announced to the assembled group. Each of you knows your role. This isn't just about our survival anymore. It's about justice. She activated a holographic display showing the planet's surface, with Kreks facilities marked in red and Safaran settlements in blue. The Kreks believe they're dealing with primitive resistance. They expect us to attack here, here, and here. She pointed to obvious targets. Instead, we'll upload our algorithm to the planetary network and let it coordinate a synchronized strike across all their operations. Lieutenant Aaron stepped forward. The algorithm will analyze and exploit Kreks' communication frequencies, causing cascading failures in their command structure. Meanwhile, our ground teams will insert these devices at key points in their power grid. He held up a small crystal-like object, a hybrid of human engineering and Safaran biotechnology. These will create a feedback loop in their energy systems, Rico explained. Not enough to destroy their technology, but enough to render it inoperable for approximately 24 hours. During that window, Ivy continued, the Safarans will reclaim their crystal formations while we secure the Kreks communication hub. Once we control their quantum transmitter, we can send a message directly to Earth. And tell them what? Asked a soldier from the back. Earth Command betrayed us. They won't just welcome us back. Maya's expression hardened. We're not asking permission to return. We're going to broadcast the truth to everyone. The unfiltered data about the deal Command made, the deliberate sacrifice of our battalion, and the attempted genocide of the Safarans. The plan was set in motion at dawn. Teams of humans and Safarans moved silently into position around Kreks installations. At precisely the calculated moment, the algorithm was uploaded to the planetary network. The effect was immediate and devastating. Kreks' communications became chaotic as their frequencies were systematically compromised. Power fluctuations rippled through their facilities as the hybrid devices activated. Within 2 hours, the methodical Kreks forces were in disarray, unable to coordinate an effective response to the simultaneous attacks on multiple fronts. Maya led the assault on the main communication hub, a towering structure at the center of the Kreks operations. The resistance was fiercer than expected. The Kreks commander had implemented manual protocols, anticipating some form of electronic warfare. They're adapting. Dex called out as a fresh wave of Kreks soldiers emerged from the facility, their weapons still functioning despite the power disruptions. So are we, Maya replied, signaling to a group of Safarans who had accompanied them. The crystalline beings began resonating, creating a harmonic frequency that interfered with the Kreks' exoskeletal communication systems, a capability the algorithm had predicted but the Kreks had never encountered. The battle was brutal but brief. When it ended, Maya stood in the Kreks command center, surrounded by alien technology and the bodies of those who had defended it. Transmitter control established, Aaron reported, his hands moving across the adapted interface. We can broadcast to Earth anytime. Maya took a moment to consider their next move. The algorithm had predicted a 73% chance that once exposed, the officials responsible for their betrayal would face justice. but it had also calculated a 58% probability that other similar projects were already in progress. "Send everything," she ordered. "All the data we've gathered on the Krex command deal, the sustainable technology the Safarans have shared with us, and our battalion logs. Send it not just to military channels, but to public networks. Everyone deserves to know what was done in humanity's name." As Aaron prepared the transmission, an unexpected alert sounded. A Krex battleship had entered orbit, one much larger than any they had encountered so far. They called for reinforcements. Dex realized, checking the sensor readings. This wasn't in our calculations. The algorithm quickly recalibrated, displaying new projections on their makeshift screens. The survival probability dropped dramatically. "Options?" Maya asked tersely. "The transmitter has enough power to reach their ship," Rico suggested. "We could send them the same data, show them what their leadership agreed to." "You want to appeal to their conscience?" Ivy asked skeptically. "I want to introduce uncertainty into their command structure," Rico clarified. "The algorithm suggests their society values hierarchical precision. If they learn their leaders acted dishonorably." Maya made her decision. "Do it. Send the transmission to the ship and to Earth simultaneously." What followed defied even the algorithm's predictions. The Krex battleship, after receiving the transmission, did not attack. Instead, it established communication with both the human Safaran alliance and the remaining Krex ground forces. The ship's commander, visible on their screens, was physically similar to the other Krex, but bore elaborate markings on its exoskeleton. "I am Supreme Adjudicator Vex Mora," it announced, its words translated by their systems. "What you have transmitted constitutes evidence of violations against the Krex Code of Expansion. The agreement made with your command was unauthorized and illegal under our laws." Maya exchanged surprised glances with her officers. "These actions were conducted by a rogue faction," the adjudicator continued. "The Krex Dominion disavows them, and will withdraw all forces from this world, which we now recognize as Safaran sovereign territory." Before Maya could respond, the transmission shifted to include a new signal. From Earth. On the screen appeared a stern-faced woman in an Earth Central Command uniform. "This is Admiral Helena Wei. We've received your transmission, Captain Chen. Arrests are underway for those involved in the unauthorized operation. A recovery vessel is being dispatched to your location immediately." Maya felt a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, suspicion. "With respect, Admiral," she replied carefully, "why should we trust Earth Command now?" The Admiral's expression remained neutral. "You shouldn't, Captain. That's why the recovery mission will be conducted under United Nations oversight, with full media transparency. Your battalion's survival and the evidence you've gathered have exposed corruption that goes beyond this mission." 6 months later, Maya stood before the United Earth Council, the highest civilian authority in Earth's government. Behind her sat the survivors of her battalion, now celebrated as heroes rather than forgotten as sacrifices. "The investigation into the conspiracy within Central Command continues," the Council President announced. "But today we recognize the extraordinary courage, resourcefulness, and integrity shown by Captain Chen and the members of the 113th Reconnaissance Battalion." Maya listened as commendations were read, as promises were made for reform and transparency. But her mind was on what had been established on Sapphire, a joint human-Safaran research outpost, studying the remarkable planetary network and developing new technologies based on their shared knowledge. The algorithm they had created, now called the Chen Protocol, had been adapted for peaceful purposes, helping to optimize resource distribution and predict environmental changes across human colonies. When it was her turn to speak, Maya stepped forward and looked out at the assembled officials and the cameras broadcasting to billions across Earth and its colonies. "They sent us to die," she said simply. "They calculated that our lives were worth sacrificing for political and economic gain. They underestimated two things: the human will to survive and the power of the truth." She paused, making eye contact with former commanders who had nearly sent her people to their deaths. Remember this the next time you make such calculations. Humans are not variables in an equation. We are not acceptable losses. And when backed into a corner, we will always find a way to rewrite the algorithm. They had been sent to die on an alien world, betrayed by their own leaders, outmatched by advanced alien species. Instead, they had not only survived, but had exposed corruption, established a new alliance, and changed the course of 3 civilizations. It was, Maya reflected as she rejoined her comrades, the most human outcome possible.